Welcome to the Gilded Hotel. The year is 1926. Outside, the city is a frantic blur of electric lights and stone. But behind the rotating brass doors of the hotel, the air changes. It becomes heavy with the scent of polished mahogany and the silence of 1,000 velvet curtains. Tonight, the building is yours to explore. From the glowing copper of the subterranean kitchens to the wind-swept stillness of the rooftop gardens, every floor has a story. Every corridor has a pulse. Let the weight of the masonry settle around you as we step into the lobby. The revolving door is more than an entrance. It is a filter. As the panels turn, the chaotic noise of the city street is cut away. You step into the hush of the grand lobby. The air here is different. It is cooler, carrying the faint, dignified scent of floor wax and old parchment. To understand this space, we must look at the floor beneath your feet. Each tile was hand-selected for its vein structure, ensuring a seamless flow. The sound of your footsteps here is not a clatter, but a soft, echoing thud. This marble, quarried from Tuscany, reflects the amber glow of chandeliers. Looking upward, the ceiling disappears into a coffered expanse of gold leaf. Architects designed these lobbies as cathedrals of commerce, humbling guests. The intricate carvings of acanthus leaves and mythical griffins act as diffusers, breaking up sound waves, turning them into the soft, velvet texture of the ambience. The pillars supporting this vast space are anchors of the room's history. If you lean against one, you feel the slight vibration of the building's heart. These elevators, or ascending rooms, are operated by gloved attendants. The sound of the brass gate sliding shut is an iconic sound of the lobby. It is a sound of transition, moving people to the private sanctuary of their rooms. In the corner of the room, tucked away near a fireplace, sit the wingback chairs. They are upholstered in heavy oxblood leather. When you sit, the leather sighs. From this vantage point, the lobby is a theater. You see the concierge, a man whose primary currency is discretion. He speaks in a low baritone, his voice barely rising above the sound of a fountain in the center of the room. This water sound is the white noise of the 1920s, masking conversations, creating small islands of privacy in a vast public sea. The lighting is strictly incandescent. There is no harshness here. As the sun sets, the lobby transitions into a golden hour that never ends. The light catches the brass trimmings of luggage carts and silver trays, creating a shimmering, blurred effect that softens the edges of the world. Dominating the wall behind the reception desk is the great clock. It is a massive dial, its hands forged from blackened steel. Unlike digital clocks, this clock has a heartbeat, a heavy, mechanical tick. Then a long, expectant silence. Then another tick. It doesn't rush you. In the grand lobby, time is not something to be managed. It is inhabited. The clock reminds you that this room belongs to the eternal present. As you close your eyes and lean back into the leather, the layers settle over you. The distant murmur of a piano, rhythmic clinking of a spoon, and velvet curtains. You are safe. You are expected. You are part of the history of this house. To inhabit the grand lobby is to be a guest of a living machine. We focus on smaller, tactile details, objects touched by thousands of hands, and the silent rituals of staff keeping chaos at bay. The reception desk, a massive slab of African mahogany, mirrors the chandelier above. Beneath its surface lies the great ledger, recording every life in ink. The scratch of a fountain pen across cream-colored paper, a tiny carving of history, midnight blue ink, smelling faintly of iron and vinegar. As a guest signs, they are woven into the hotel's timeline. The clerk, a master of the unspoken, waits in perfect stillness. His uniform, heavy and dark wool, makes a faint, dry sound. He hands you a Kia-weighted piece of brass with a silk tassel. The weight of that key, solid, cold, permanent, anchors your stay. Behind the desk lies the grand staircase, for ceremony, not speed. Wide enough for 4 people abreast, designed for Edwardian gowns. The marble steps, gently worn in the center by a century of shoes. As you walk up, the lobby's sound changes, losing sharp edges. It transforms into a soft, rushing sound, like a distant waterfall. The ventilation hum becomes dominant, the building breathing. The staircase acts as a chimney for sound, dissipating it upstairs. Off to the side, behind frosted glass doors, is the writing room, the quietest corner, with a carpet so thick it swallows sound. The air smells of cedarwood and old glue. On each desk, hotel stationery with a gold leaf crest. In 1926, this room was the primary link to the world. Writing a letter here was a slow, meditative process. The dip of the pen into the crystal inkwell, the careful blot of the page, the folding of the paper. These are the microsounds, hundreds of letters, each carrying a story to a different corner. The writing room, a sanctuary where time is measured by drying ink. We must also consider the page boy, the most mobile element. His job is seeking. He carries a silver tray with a name, walking through seated guests, announcing a name, clear but never loud. His voice, a recurring motif, reminds us the hotel is a hub of connection. He moves with grace, weaving between chairs and pillars. Behind him, the luggage porter, world defined by leather straps, trunks of wood, brass, and hide, carrying the scent of travel. When a trunk is set down, a deep, resonant thud vibrates. It is the sound of a journey coming to an end. As we reach the end of this hour, the lobby begins its transition. The head porter adjusts vents or dims secondary lights. One by one, bright spots extinguish, leaving amber glow. The social white noise thins. The lobby grows larger. The hum of ventilation, the hotel's rest mode, becomes apparent. Shadows grow long, stretching across the marble floor like fingers. The great clock continues its steady, mechanical heartbeat. You are in the deepest part of the lobby's day, a vacuum for sleep. Through heavy, iron-framed doors, at the rear of the grand lobby, lies the Winter Garden. In 1926, these glass-enclosed courtyards were the height of luxury, offering nature's greenery, even in freezing January. Stepping from the lobby's marble onto the garden's crushed gravel paths, the acoustics instantly change. The deep hum of ventilation is joined by a lighter frequency, wind brushing against thousands of glass panes high above. The Winter Garden's structure is a marvel of Victorian engineering, surviving into the Art Deco era. These ribs hold hand-blown glass sheets, shielding exotic palms from the city's soot. When it rains, the sound is transformative. Not a loud splash, but a delicate, crystalline tinkling on the glass. This sound is the ultimate sleep aid, a high-frequency texture atop the lobby's low rumble. Beneath the glass, huge Kentia palms and Boston ferns absorb echoes, contributing to the silence. Sound is swallowed by soil and damp leaves, creating an incredibly private, deadened acoustic space. The smell here is wet earth and jasmine, a sharp, sweet departure from the foyer's wax and leather. The paths are fine, pale gravel. Walking slowly, deliberately, creates a soft, rhythmic she sound. This sound matches the human breath. Here, the listener's heart rate truly syncs with the environment. Every few yards, a deep forest green wrought iron bench offers a place to sit. From here, watch palm shadows move across the glass as the moon rises. To sit here is to be inside out, protected, yet aware of the vast, dark sky above. At the garden's center sits a small, circular pond, not a grand fountain, but a weeping one. Water trickles slowly over moss-covered stones into a pool with dark, slow-moving koi fish. The sound is a constant, low-level gurgle, the garden's liquid heartbeat in the night's silence. Occasionally, A fish breaks the surface with a tiny plop, sending ripples through the glass ceiling's reflection. These unpredictable sounds make the experience feel real, glitches in the silence, convincing the brain. As temperature drops, mist forms on the glass, blurring 1926 skyscrapers into glowing ghosts. The world outside ceases to exist. Only the garden, glass, and the building's protective hum remain. Staff rarely enters after midnight. It's left to guests and plants, with only a palm fronds sway. This is the Grand Hotel's deepest sanctuary, where Earth's history meets human ambition. Leaning back, the fountain's gurgle and distant chatter merge into an unbreakable chord of sound. You are resting in the lungs of the hotel. While guests sleep, the hotel's heart, the kitchen, ever stops. At 3 in the morning, the heavy swinging doors separating dining room from pantry are still. The air here is cooler, smelling of scrubbed stone, rosemary, and the metallic temps of cold metal. This is the domain of the copper pot and cast iron range, a place of heavy materials and tradition. Tools used to feed the elite were as old as the mountains they were forged from. Against white-tiled walls, copper cookware hangs in silent rows, gleaming like setting suns. Copper is the king of the kitchen for its thermal conductivity. Feel the heat these pots held. Copper reacts instantly to flame, allowing a chef precise temperature control. But copper is a living metal, requiring constant care. Every few months, pots must be retinned. Imagine the tinsmith heating a heavy pot until it glows, wiping liquid tin across the surface. The sound is a soft, metallic hiss, followed by the smell of hot metal and oil. When the tin cools, it creates a silver-white surface. In the pantry's stillness, silver linings catch moonlight. If copper is king, cast iron is its soul. The Gilded Hotel's ranges are massive, black monoliths. Unlike copper, cast iron stays warm for hours, holding the thermal memory of the day's cooking. Cast iron is formed in sand molds, giving it a porous, grainy texture. Over years, pans are seasoned. Microscopic fat layers bake into the iron, creating a non-stick patina, a record of every meal. To handle a century-old skillet is to feel history's weight. It is heavy, uncompromising, permanent. In the quiet night, you might hear the faint tink-tink of iron cooling down, a sound of metal contracting, finally releasing the heat of the evening's dinner service. Moving deeper into the pantry, we find the cold storage. Before modern refrigeration, hotels relied on massive ice boxes lined with zinc and insulated with cork or sawdust. Every morning, huge blocks of ice were delivered, cut from frozen lakes in the north, and shipped in sawdust-packed railcars. In the middle of the night, you can hear the slow, rhythmic drip of melting ice into the drainage pans below. It is a watery metronome that marks the passage of the night. The shelves here are laden with the building blocks of Roman and European cuisine: jars of preserved lemons, crocks of salted butter from Normandy, and heavy sacks of flour from the Midwest. Each ingredient has its own sound: the dry rustle of the grain, the clop of the buttercrock's lid, and the slosh of the olive oil in its amphora. The pantry is a library of flavors, and the staff who work here are its librarians. They know the exact location of every spice, from the sharp, peppery scent of mace to the deep, earthy aroma of dried porcini mushrooms. The final ritual of the midnight pantry is the cleaning. The pot washers work in a world of steam and soap. The sound of a heavy copper pot being scrubbed with wood ash and vinegar is a rhythmic, abrasive sound that echoes off the tiles. It is a labor of love and necessity. By the time the first rays of dawn hit the glass of the winter garden, every surface in the pantry must be spotless. The copper must shine, the iron must be oiled, and the stone floors must be damp mopped. As the last pot is hung on its hook with a final resonant clang, the kitchen settles into its briefest moment of total silence. The tools are ready. The history is preserved. The cycle is about to begin again. The journey from the grand marble floors of the lobby to the private sanctuaries of the upper floors is mediated by a small, mahogany-lined room that defies gravity. In 1926, the elevator was not merely a utility. It was a marvel of the new age, a transition space where the guest was suspended between the public theater of the foyer and the quiet intimacy of their suite. To enter the elevator is to step into a cabinet of mirrors and polished brass, a space where the air is still and the only sound is the rhythmic, mechanical pulse of the building's nervous system. The heart of this machine is the Otis safety mechanism, a triumph of 19th century engineering that allowed the modern skyscraper to exist. Before the safety hoist, people feared the snapping of a cable, but Elisha Otis's invention of the automatic brake turned the elevator into a place of supreme security. The sound of the elevator begins with the operator, a man in a crisp, braided uniform. With a practiced flick of his wrist, he slides the outer iron gate shut. This is a sound of finality, metallic, sliding shink, followed by a heavy thud as the latch catches. Then, the inner gold-plated gate is drawn across, creating a cage within a cage. As the operator rotates the brass handle, the car doesn't jump, it breathes. You feel a gentle pressure in the soles of your feet. The sound is a low-frequency hum, a whir that is felt as much as it is heard. This is the sound of electricity and steel cables moving over giant pulleys. In the 1920s, these cables were kept meticulously oiled, and as the car rises, you can catch the faint, industrial scent of graphite and machine grease, a sharp contrast to the lavender and beeswax of the lobby below. Inside the car, the walls are paneled in dark bird's-eye maple, polished until they reflect the glowing floor indicator above the door. This indicator is a semicircle of brass with numbers etched in an elegant serif font. A small needle sweeps across the dial, ticking softly as it passes each floor. Tick, tick, tick. It is a visual representation of your ascent through the hotel's history. Between the floors, you are in a non-space, a vertical tunnel of cool air and shadow. If you listen closely, you can hear the whoosh of the wind as the car displaces the air in the shaft, a soft, rushing sound that mimics the ocean's tide. The elevator operator is the silent guardian of this journey. He does not speak unless spoken to, but he possesses a spatial memory that is nearly perfect. He knows exactly when to return the handle to the neutral position so that the car floors perfectly with the landing. In an era before automatic leveling, this was a manual art. A poor operator would leave a 2-inch gap, a stumble in the guest's experience. But a master operator makes the stop invisible. The car slows, the hum of the cables drops in pitch, and there is a moment of total weightlessness before the gates are opened. When the gates slide back, you are greeted by a different world. The social white noise of the lobby is gone, replaced by the deep, muffled silence of the residential corridors. The air here is warmer, and the lighting is dimmer, provided by small alabaster sconces that cast long amber shadows. The elevator car remains behind you, a glowing box of brass in a dark hallway, its gates sliding shut again with a whisper of steel. The operator descends back into the depths, and you are left in the stillness of the upper reaches, where the only sound is the rhythmic tick of your own pocket watch. The physics of the elevator shaft also acts as a giant organ pipe for the building. On a windy night, the air moving over the top of the hotel creates a low moaning sound that travels down the steel cables. It is a haunting, beautiful sound, a reminder that even this massive stone monument is subject to the elements. This shaft song is a constant companion to the night porter as he makes his rounds. It is a sound that signals the vastness of the hotel, a reminder that there are hundreds of rooms, hundreds of stories, all connected by these vertical veins of steel and light. To understand the elevator is to understand the Roman concept of the liminal, the threshold. It is the bridge between the earthbound reality of the street and the airy, light-filled heights of the penthouse. As the car moves through the darkness of the shaft, the guest is in a state of suspension, a physical and mental pause that prepares them for sleep. The rhythmic vibration of the floor, the smell of the mahogany, and the steady, ticking needle of the floor indicator all serve to ground the passenger, turning a simple mechanical act into a ritual of transition. By the time you reach your floor, the frantic energy of the day has been filtered out by the layers of the building. The elevator has done its job, not just moving your body, but shifting your state of mind. As the brass needle comes to rest on your floor number, the final clack of the mechanism is the signal that you have arrived. The doors part, the carpeted hallway stretches out before you like a velvet path, and the silent machine waits, ready to descend once more into the golden heart of the lobby. To find the library of whispers, one must move away from the primary circulation of the grand lobby and follow a narrow wood-paneled corridor that seems to dampen sound with every step you take. The transition is marked by a change in the very air you breathe. The scent of wood smoke and expensive perfumes fades, replaced by the deep, intoxicating aroma of old book smell. This is a complex chemistry of vanishing time, the scent of lignin in the paper breaking down into the earthy musk of leather bindings, and the faint, almond-like trail of ancient glues. In the year 1926, the hotel library was designed to be a secular chapel, a place where the frenetic pulse of the jazz age was forbidden to enter. As you push open the heavy oak doors, the first thing you notice is the weight of the silence. It is not an empty silence, but a heavy one, a silence composed of millions of printed words pressing against the dark mahogany shelves that reach from the Persian carpeted floor to the shadowed, coffered ceiling. The lighting in the library is strictly local, provided by green-shaded banker's lamps that cast pools of emerald light onto the reading tables. These lamps hum with a very faint 60-cycle vibration that becomes the heartbeat of the room. Outside of these small islands of light, the library is a landscape of shadows. The books are arranged not by the modern Dewey Decimal System, but by the Library of Congress style, or, in some cases, simply by the color and size of their bindings to create a visual harmony. When you reach for a volume, perhaps a leather-bound history of the Punic Wars, or a first edition of a Victorian travelogue, the sound of the book sliding against its neighbors is a soft, dry hiss, a friction of parchment against wood. The weight of the book is surprising. It carries the density of the 19th century, made with paper that was meant to last for 500 years. As you open it, the spine gives a small, characteristic crack, the sound of the hide and the stitching yielding to your curiosity after decades of being closed. To sit in the library at midnight is to participate in the history of human thought. The wingback chairs are upholstered in a velvet so deep it feels like moss, and they are positioned to face the oversized fireplace. The fire here is never allowed to blaze. It is kept as a bed of glowing embers, providing a low-frequency crackle that acts as a natural white noise. This sound, combined with the rhythmic tick-tock of a grandfather clock in the corner, creates a hypnotic environment for the sleeper. The clock is a masterpiece of horology, its long brass pendulum swinging with a deliberate, heavy momentum. Every 15 minutes, it prepares to chime, and you can hear the internal gears whirry into precise metallic preparatory click that signals the passage of time. But the chime itself is muted, a soft bong that feels like it is coming from underwater, designed to inform the guest without startling them. The acoustics of the library are shaped by the books themselves. A wall of books is one of the most effective sound absorbers ever created. Each page acts as a tiny baffle, trapping sound waves and preventing them from echoing. This is why, even if there were 10 other people in the room, you would feel entirely alone. You might hear the distant turn of a pedicrisp, paper-like snap, or the soft thud of a book being closed. But these sounds are isolated, never merging into a crowd. In 1926, this room was the only place where a guest could truly hear their own thoughts. It was a space for writing letters on the hotel's heavy linen stationery, where the only competition was the scratch of a nib and the occasional shush of a silk dress moving across the carpet. Looking closely at the shelves, you see the ghost books, volumes that have been in the hotel since its opening day, their titles faded into the leather until they are nothing more than gold leaf shadows. There are maps of empires that no longer exist, botanical guides to flowers that have been forgotten and long, winding biographies of men whose names have slipped from the public consciousness. In the 3-hour journey of our video, this is the section where the listener's mind can wander most freely. The library represents the storage of human experience, a safe harbor where everything is recorded and nothing is lost. As you lean your head back against the velvet, the emerald light of the lamps begins to blur. The scent of the leather bindings becomes a warm blanket, and the rhythmic swing of the pendulum becomes a cradle. The library also serves as a bridge to the microhistory of the hotel itself. Tucked away in a glass case are the original blueprints of the building, drawn in white ink on blue paper. They show the hidden staircases, the thick foundations of the elevator shafts, and the complex network of bells that once connected every room to the servants' hall. To look at these plans is to see the skeleton of the Gilded Hotel. You realize that the silence you are enjoying is engineered. It is the result of thick masonry, lead-lined pipes, and the deliberate layering of materials. The library is the brain of the building, the place where its memories are stored in ink and paper. As the night progresses toward 3 in the morning, the library takes on a silver quality. The moonlight filters through the high arched windows, casting long rectangles of blue light across the spines of the books. The green lamps are eventually turned off by the night porter, one by one. The click of the switches is the only sharp sound in the room. Now, the library is lit only by the dying embers of the fire and the moon. The room feels larger, the ceiling higher. The silence deepens, becoming almost physical, like a layer of soft dust settling over the furniture. You are no longer a guest in a hotel. You are a traveler in time, anchored by the weight of the books and the steady, ancient rhythm of the clock. To enter the grand ballroom at 3 o'clock in the morning is to step into a space that has been stripped of its primary purpose, leaving behind only the haunting resonance of its own geometry. In the year 1926, this room was the social apex of the hotel, a place of 1,000-watt brilliance, the scent of expensive gardenias, and the frantic energy of the Charleston. But in the deep night, the ballroom undergoes a metamorphosis. The heavy double doors, finished in gold leaf and ivory, creak slightly as they swing open, admitting a draft of cool air into a room that feels as vast as a darkened cathedral. The acoustics here are the most complex in the entire building. Without the hundreds of human bodies that usually act as sound absorbers, the room becomes a giant echo chamber. Every tiny sound, the click of your heel on the parquetry, the rustle of a curtain, or even the sound of your own breathing, is magnified and returned to you, softened by the immense distance of the ceiling. The floor is a masterpiece of floating construction, a sea of white oak and walnut, polished to a mirror finish. In the moonlight, it looks like a sheet of still water. This floor was designed with a slight spring to it, intended to cushion the feet of dancers for hours on end. And as you walk across it now, it feels unnervingly alive. There is a specific sound to an empty ballroom floor, a low-frequency groan of wood settling after a day of expansion and contraction. It is a slow, rhythmic sound that mimics the shifting of a ship at sea. The smell here is a mixture of floor wax, cold ozone, and the faint, lingering trail of perfume that has settled into the heavy velvet draperies. These curtains, 30 feet tall and weighing hundreds of pounds, are made of a deep midnight blue velvet. They act as the room's lungs, swaying almost imperceptibly in the air currents created by the hotel's massive ventilation shafts. Dominating the void are the 3 great chandeliers, each a mountain of hand-cut bohemian crystal. In the darkness, they do not sparkle. They glow with a ghostly, refracted light from the city outside. They are not static objects, suspended by heavy iron chains that disappear into the darkness of the ceiling. They move with a subtle, circular momentum. This movement produces the most delicate sound in the hotel, the crystal shiver. It is a sound so faint it exists at the edge of human hearing, a tiny, glass-like tinkling as thousands of crystal prisms brush against one another. It is the sound of light turned into music. In our 3-hour journey, this is the moment of total immersion, where the high-frequency shimmer of the glass sits perfectly atop the low-frequency hum of the building's foundations. At the far end of the room stands the bandstand, a raised dais of white marble, where the orchestra once played. Now, it holds only a solitary grand piano, draped in a heavy silk cover to protect its strings from the night dampness. The piano is a silent sentinel, a black silhouette against the silver gray of the walls. The air around the bandstand feels different, as if the vibrations of decades of music have been permanently etched into the plasterwork. In the 1920s, architects understood the psychology of the void. They designed these rooms to feel magnificent even when empty, using the golden ratio and classical proportions to create a sense of balance. To sit on the edge of the bandstand now is to feel that balance. The symmetry of the room, the rows of fluted Corinthian columns, the arched mirrors that face one another across the void, creates a sense of infinite space that is incredibly grounding for the mind. The mirrors are perhaps the most mysterious element of the ballroom at night. Made of silvered glass that is nearly half an inch thick, they do not just reflect the room, they seem to deepen it. As the moon moves across the sky, the reflections shift, creating the illusion of distant, shadowed hallways where none exist. This mirror depth is a visual equivalent to the room's echoes. It gives the listener a sense of being in a place that has no boundaries, a place where the history of every dance and every conversation is still echoing in the silvered glass. There is no urgency here. The ballroom at 3 a.m. is a place where time has been suspended. The frantic tick of the lobby clock is lost in this vastness, replaced by the slow, geological rhythm of the building itself. Looking up, the ceiling is a series of recessed domes, painted with clouds and mythological figures that are now lost in shadow. These domes were designed to throw the sound of the violins down toward the dancers, but in the silence, they act as collectors of the building's smallest noises. You can hear the clink of a steam pipe 3 floors away, or the muffled thud of an elevator gate closing in another wing. These sounds are filtered through the ballroom's volume until they become soft and rhythmic, like the sounds of a distant forest. This is the social white noise at its most abstract, the ghost of a building's life, processed through a sea of velvet and crystal as the hour draws to a close. A thin layer of blue light begins to creep across the floor from the high arched windows. The transition from the deep night to the early pre-dawn is almost invisible. The crystal shiver of the chandeliers continues, a constant and comforting reminder of the room's elegance. The velvet curtains give one final, heavy sigh as the building's heaters begin to kick in for the morning. You are standing in the center of a masterpiece of human engineering and artistic vision, a room that was built to be a stage for the world, but which finds its truest beauty in the silence of the night. As you turn to leave, the floor gives one last wooden creak of farewell, and the double doors latch shut with a sound like a heartbeat, leaving the grand ballroom to its silver reflections and its infinite, echoing peace. Behind the main reception desk of the grand lobby, tucked into a discreet niche of polished cherry wood, lies the concierge's desk. While the main hotel register is a public document of names and dates, the concierge's ledger is something far more intimate, a handwritten record of the human desires, logistics, and quiet dramas that fuel the building's daily life. In the stillness of the pre-dawn hours, this ledger sits closed. A heavy volume bound in forest green Moroccan leather, with corners reinforced by tarnished brass. To touch the cover is to feel the texture of decades of service. The leather is cool, slightly waxy, and bears the faint indentations of thousands of frantic notes scribbled by men who made the impossible seem effortless. In 1926, the concierge was the architect of the guest's reality, and his ledger was the blueprint. Opening the book now, the sound of the heavy, cream-colored pages turning is a slow, rhythmic crinkle snap, a sound that carries the weight of 1,000 secrets. The handwriting within is a gallery of early 20th century script-spittery fountain pen lines, thick-nibbed flourishes, and hasty pencil notations. Each entry is a microhistory of a moment in time, a request for 36 yellow roses to be delivered to a suite at midnight, a booking for a private railcar to the coast, or a reminder to wake a sleeping diplomat with a specific blend of Earl Grey tea. As you scan the pages in the dim amber light of the service lamp, the smell of the ink rises to meet you, a sharp, metallic scent that feels like a physical connection to the past. This ledger represents the human logistics of the hotel. It is a record of the invisible energy required to maintain the illusion of seamless luxury. In the context of our 3-hour sleep journey, this is the point where we contemplate the order behind the chaos, the steady, organized hand that ensures the world remains in its proper place while we rest. The desk itself is a marvel of organized utility. It features dozens of small pigeonholes, each one containing a fragment of the city outside. There are theater programs printed on silk, maps of the steamship docks, and tiny hand-printed cards for the best tailors on Savile Row. Each piece of paper has its own tactile quality, the snick of the heavy cardstock, the rustle of the thin vellum. The desk also houses the key cabinet, a grid of numbered hooks where the spare brass keys hang. When the night breeze from the lobby caught them, they would produce a delicate metallic chime, a sound that reminded the night porter of the hundreds of locked doors and the hundreds of sleeping lives they protected. This key music is a recurring motif in the hotel's night song, a high-frequency contrast to the deep, resonant hum of the building's boilers. The concierge of 1926 was a man of absolute discretion, and his ledger reflects this. Many entries are written in a personal shorthand, a private language of symbols and abbreviations that only he and his assistants understood. To read, it is to feel like a cryptographer decoding the social pulse of the Gilded Age. You see the names of opera singers, industrial magnates, and exiled royalty, all reduced to a single line of ink. There is a profound sense of peace in this organization. The ledger proves that every problem has a solution, every request has been met, and every guest is being watched over. This sense of controlled environment is a powerful psychological tool for sleep. It assures the listener that they are in a space where the watchers are diligent, where the records are kept, and where the history of their stay is being archived with care and respect. Beside the ledger sits a heavy, silver-plated bell. It is not the service bell of a common in Pule, but a reception chime with a deep, melodic tone that lingers in the air for several seconds after it is struck. In the middle of the night, no one strikes the bell, but it remains there as a symbol of availability. It catches the light of the lobby's distant chandeliers, a bright silver eye in the shadows of the desk. The desk also contains the pneumatic tube station, a brass portal, connected to a network of lead pipes that snake through the hotel's walls. Occasionally, with a sudden thwack hiss, a small leather capsule would arrive from the telegraph office or the kitchens, carrying a message. This sound, a sudden intake of breath, followed by a soft arrival, is the sound of the hotel's internal communication, a secret heartbeat that only the staff truly hears as the night moves toward the 4 o'clock hour. The concierge's desk becomes a lighthouse of sorts. It is the one place where a light is always burning, where a person is always waiting. The ledger is eventually closed for the night, the brass latch clicking into place with a sound of total security. The book is placed back into its velvet-lined niche, joining the volumes of previous years. These ledgers form a paper wall of history, a library of service that spans the life of the hotel. They contain the records of forgotten storms, celebrated weddings, and the quiet arrivals of people who just wanted a place to disappear for a while. To the sleeper, the ledger is a reminder that their own story is currently being written into the silence of the room, a single, peaceful line in a book that never ends. The final element of the concierge's domain is the city map, a giant, hand-drawn map of the metropolis that hangs on the wall behind the desk. It is protected by a sheet of heavy plate glass. In the dim light, the streets and avenues look like the veins of a giant organism. You can see the docks where the great liners arrive, the parks where the carriages roam, and the dense clusters of the theater district. The hotel is at the very center of this map, a stone anchor in a shifting world. As you look at the map, the scale of the city makes the hotel feel even more like a fortress of calm. The sounds of the distant city, the muffled foghorns from the river, the faint clatter of a late-night tramway, all filtered through the map, through the ledger, and through the thick stone walls of the lobby until they are nothing more than a memory. You are safe in the center of the grid, protected by the ink, the leather, and the silent, watchful history of the concierge's desk. Deep within the subterranean heart of the hotel, far below the velvet-lined corridors and the marble expanse of the lobby, lies the silver vault. This is a room of temperature-controlled stillness, lined with floor-tusseling, shelving made of heavy industrial steel. In the year 1926, the hotel's silver service was not merely a set of utensils. It was a massive, shining fleet of thousands of individual pieces, each crafted to serve a specific, singular purpose in the complex choreography of a formal dinner. To enter this room at 4 a.m. is to enter a cathedral of reflection. The air is dry and smells faintly of jeweler's rouge, pink polishing cream, and the sharp, clean scent of pure silver. There is no social chatter here, no clatter of the kitchen, only the rhythmic, metallic clink of the night polisher's worker sound that is as steady and hypnotic as the ticking of a grandfather clock. The night polisher is a man of immense patience. He sits at a wooden bench, a single articulated lamp illuminating a vast sea of tarnished spoons, forks, and heavy platters. In his hands, he holds a piece of soft chamois leather. As he works, the sound is a repetitive, abrasive shush-shush, a sound that represents the literal rubbing away of time. Silver, by its very nature, is a metal that hungers for oxygen, constantly developing a thin, dark veil of tarnish. The polisher's job is to reclaim the brilliance. As the tarnish vanishes, the piece begins to sing. The light of the lamp hits the curved surface of a soup tureen, refracting into 1,000 tiny points that dance across the steel walls. The silver doesn't just reflect light, it seems to amplify it, turning the dim basement room into a chamber of liquid stars. To understand the silver service is to understand the incredible specialization of the Gilded Age. There are forks designed solely for the consumption of oysters, with 3 short tines and a curved edge. There are tiny, delicate spoons for salt, heavy ladles for consomme, and long, elegant tongs for sugar cubes. Each piece has a weight that surprises the hand. This is not the hollow, stamped stainless steel of the modern era. This is hotel plate, a heavy base metal, electroplated with a thick layer of sterling silver. When 2 of these pieces touch, they produce a deep, bell-like chime that resonates through the quiet of the vault. This sound the chink of heavy silvers, the true background radiation of the hotel's luxury. Even when the dining room is empty, the memory of that sound remains, a phantom echo of thousands of high society toasts. As the polisher moves from the flatware to the hollowware, the scale of the service becomes apparent. There are massive silver domes, or cloches, designed to be lifted simultaneously by a line of waiters to reveal the main course in a cloud of steam. There are 3-tiered stands for afternoon tea, ornate coffee pots with ivory heat breaks in their handles, and heavy wine buckets that still carry the faint, cold scent of melted ice. Each of these objects is engraved with the hotel's cresta lion, a crown, or a stylized monogram. The engraving is a tactile landscape of its own. You can run your thumb over the ridges and valleys of the silver, feeling the bite of the engraver's tool from 50 years ago. This is history you can touch, a physical record of a house that prides itself on permanence. The organization of the Silver Vault is a masterclass in logistics. Each shelf is labeled with small brass tags, fish knives, asparagus tongs, grape scissors. There is a profound sense of peace in this order. Every object has a home, and every object is being prepared for its moment of utility. For the sleeper, this section of the journey represents the polishing of the mind. Just as the night polisher removes the tarnish from the silver, the slow, rhythmic narration and the steady background hum of the vault help to remove the tarnish of the day's anxieties. The image of 1,000 silver spoons, all perfectly aligned and gleaming in the dark, is a powerful visual for internal order and calm. By the time the clock strikes 4:30 a.m., the polisher has moved on to the showpieces. These are the massive silver candelabra that decorate the center of the banquet tables. They are complex structures of scrawled branches and wax catching pans. Cleaning them requires a different set of tools, small, soft brushes that make a flick-flick sound as they remove dust from the intricate silver leaves. As he works, the polisher might hum a low, tuneless melody to himself, his voice blending with the distant rumble of the hotel's laundry machines 3 floors away. The vault is a bubble of industry in a world of sleep, a place where the glimmer of the hotel is manufactured by hand, 1 spoon at a time. The final ritual of the silver vault is the inventory. Before the morning shift arrives, the night polisher counts the most valuable pieces, his finger tapping the silver with a soft, dull thud. He records the numbers in a small, cloth-bound book, his pencil scratching across the paper in the silence. The vault door, a heavy slab of reinforced steel, is then closed and locked. The sound of the tumblers falling into place, a series of heavy, metallic clacks, is the final note of the hour. The silver is ready. It sits in the darkness, a hidden treasury of reflection, waiting for the first light of dawn to travel down the service elevators and into the dining room. As you drift deeper into sleep, the image of the silver remains, cool bright and perfectly ordered world where every surface is polished and every reflection is clear. Deep below the marble and the velvet, beyond the silver vault and the silent kitchens, lies the mechanical soul of the hotel. This is the realm of the engineers, a place of red-painted pipes, brass valves, and the heavy, rhythmic breathing of the great steam boilers. In the year 1926, a hotel of this scale was essentially a stationary steamship anchored in the soil of the city. To enter the engine room at 5 in the morning is to leave the world of aesthetics and enter the world of pure physics. The air here is warmer, carrying the scent of heavy oil, hot iron, and the sweet, humid smell of high-pressure steam. The soundscape changes completely. The social white noise of the lobby is replaced by a symphonic, industrial drone, deep, resonant thrum that vibrates in your chest and provides a perfect, unchanging frequency for deep rest. The centerpiece of this subterranean world is the boiler line, a row of massive steel cylinders that resemble sleeping whales. Behind their iron fire doors, a steady, controlled inferno creates the energy that heats the baths, cooks the meals, and powers the laundry. The sound of the fire is a muffled, continuous roar, like a distant ocean tide trapped behind a stone wall. Occasionally, a pressure valve will release a tiny, controlled burst of steamer-sharp hiss that quickly dissipates into the vastness of the basement. This is the building's breath, a sign that the heart is healthy and functioning. The engineers move through this space like ghosts, their boots making a heavy, metallic clank on the diamond plate steel catwalks. They carry long-necked oil cans, applying a single golden drop of lubricant to the moving joints of the pumps. The sound of the oil can, a tiny, spring-loaded click-clack, is the smallest sound in the largest room, a testament to the precision required to keep the hotel alive. Following the pipes upward, you see the veins of the building. Thousands of miles of copper and lead pipes are strapped to the ceiling, color-coded and labeled with brass tags. There is a constant, watery rush within them, a sound of movement that never ceases. If you were to press your ear against the cool insulation of a water main, you would hear the pulse of the city's aqueducts feeding the hotel's appetite. This is the hydraulic white noise, a sound that has been proven to soothe the human mind by mimicking the sounds of the womb. In 1926, the plumbing was a point of immense pride. Running hot and cold water was a luxury, advertised on the hotel's banners. The physics of this system, the way gravity and pressure work together to lift water 20 stories into the airs a silent miracle of engineering that happens while the guests are dreaming in the corner of the engine room sits the governor, a spinning brass mechanism of balls and levers that regulates the speed of the hotel's internal generators. It spins with a hypnotic, blur-like velocity, catching the light of the bare electric bulbs and throwing golden reflections across the brick walls. The sound of the governor is a high-frequency whir, a steady note that sits like a flute over the bass drum of the boilers. It is a visual representation of balance. As long as the governor spins, the lights stay on, the elevators move, and the hotel remains a sanctuary of civilization. To watch it is to understand the concept of momentum, the idea that once a great system is in motion, it possesses a peaceful, unstoppable force. The engineers also maintain the pneumatic brain of the building. This is a wall of glass-faced gauges with trembling needles, recording the temperature of every floor and the pressure of every pipe. The needles move in tiny, erratic ticks, responding to a guest turning on a bath or a chef lighting a stove. This is the hotel's nervous system, a web of copper capillary tubes that carries information from the roof to the basement. In the quiet of the pre-dawn, the engineers record these numbers in a heavy, grease-stained logbook. The scratch of their pencils is the only human narrative in a room dominated by machines. There is a profound sense of safety in this vigilance. While the world outside is unpredictable, the engine room is a place of absolute laws and measurable forces. As we move toward the final minutes of this hour, we consider the steam chasm, the great vertical shaft where the main heat pipes rise through the center of the hotel. This shaft acts as a natural resonator. The sounds of the boilers are carried upward, filtered by the floors and the walls until they reach the guest rooms as that deep bass hum we have followed from the beginning. It is the sound of the hotel's warmth. In the winter of 1926, the steam clanking in the cast iron radiators was the lullaby of the city, a rhythmic, metallic tink-tink-think that told the sleeper they were protected from the frost. This sound is the ultimate symbol of the industrial age's promise that through fire and iron we can create a world of perpetual comfort. The engine room is the only place in the hotel where time is measured in revolutions per minute rather than hours and minutes. It is a place of constant motion that results in total stillness for the guest above. As the engineer closes the final steam valve and checks the water level one last time, the room settles into its morning rhythm. The heart is steady, the veins are full, the lungs are breathing. As you drift deeper into the heavy, oil-scented warmth of sleep, the image of the spinning brass governor remains in your mind, the golden, blurring circle of perfect order, spinning forever in the silent dark. The visual language of the Gilded Hotel is not only written in stone and velvet, but is lived through the men who wear its colors. In the quiet hours of 5 in the morning, the staff locker room in the basement is a place of silent preparation, where the transition from civilian to servant takes place. The uniform of the 1920s hotel staff was a masterpiece of psychological design, intended to convey a sense of military precision, absolute reliability, and invisible presence. As the bellhops and porters prepare for the early morning shift, the sound of the room is one of high-tension fabric and metallic clicks. The heavy wool of the jackets dyed a deep regal crimson or a midnight blue has a specific weight and stiffness. When a bellhop pulls on his tunic, the sound is a dry, muffled whoosh of fabric, followed by the rapid-fire clink-clink-clink of 30 brass buttons, being fastened from waist to chin. These buttons are the armor of service. Each one is embossed with the hotel's crest, polished until they catch the dim light of the basement like a row of golden eyes. The jacket is designed with a high, stiff mandarin collar that forces the wearer into a posture of permanent alertness. To the guest, the bellhop appears as a pillar of the hotel's order, but to the man inside the wool, the uniform is a vessel. It carries the scent of cedar blocks, steam pressing, and a faint hint of the lavender water used to keep the fabric fresh. As they pull on their white cotton gloves, there is a soft, stretching snap. These gloves are a crucial part of the history for sleep narrative. They represent the untouched world. In the Gilded Hotel, no human hand ever directly touches a guest's luggage or a silver tray. The white glove is the barrier that ensures the illusion of a pristine, frictionless existence. The most iconic element of the ensemble is the pillbox hat, worn at a slight rakish angle and held in place by a thin chin strap. It is a symbol of mobility. The bellhop is the Mercury of the hotel, moving between the floors with a silent, gliding gait. Their shoes are specially crafted with soft rubber inserts in the heels to ensure that their movement across the marble lobby is a whisper rather than a clatter. As they move, the only sound you might hear is the faint, rhythmic swish of their trouser legs and the soft jingle of the brass keys hanging from a hidden loop inside their pocket. This is the sound of the hotel waking up, a series of small, intentional noises that signal the return of human activity to the silent halls. The porters, by contrast, wear uniforms of a heavier, darker cloth. Their role is one of strength and endurance, and their clothing reflects the industrial side of luxury. They wear leather aprons when handling the massive steamer trunks that arrive from the docks, and their belts are thick, heavy straps of hide designed to support the weight of the city's commerce. The sound of a porter at work is a study in friction, the creak of leather, the grinding of a heavy trunk across a stone floor, and the clank of a brass luggage cart being steered into an elevator. In the 1920s, these men were the strong men of the hospitality world, and their presence provided a sense of physical security to the guests. If the bellhop is the hotel's grace, the porter is its gravity in the pre-dawn stillness. The staff gathers in the service hall for the morning inspection. The head porter moves down the line, his eyes scanning for a loose thread, a tarnished button, or a smudge on a white glove. The silence during this ritual is absolute, broken only by the distant hum of the boilers we explored in the previous hour. This discipline is what allowed the hotel to function as a five-star machine. Every man in line understands that he is a part of the building's architecture. To the sleeper upstairs, the presence of these uniformed men is a subconscious comfort. They are the watchers who ensure that the morning papers are delivered silently to the doorstep, that the shoes left in the hallway are polished to a mirror finish, and that the world outside remains at a respectful distance as the shift begins. The bellhops move into the lobby, taking their stations behind the marble pillars. They stand in total stillness, their hands clasped behind their backs. In this state, they become part of the furniture, as much a part of the room as the velvet curtains or the grand piano. This passive service is a hallmark of the Gilded Age. The goal was to be available the instant a guest had a need, but to be completely invisible until that moment. The sound of their world is the sound of waiting, the rhythmic tick of the lobby clock, the sigh of the wind in the chimney, and the faint metallic clinking of the elevator gates. They are the human anchors of the hotel's peace. The history of the uniform also tells the story of social transition. Many of these men were veterans of the Great War, and the military influence on their dress was not accidental. It provided a sense of structure and pride in an era of rapid change. When you listen to the sounds of the uniform of authority, you are listening to the sound of a society that valued ceremony and protocol. Each brass button and each white glove was a promise kept to the gesta, promise of a world where everything was in its place and everyone had a role. As you drift deeper into the early morning light, the image of the crimson tunic and the golden buttons remains a steady, colorful sentinel in the shadows of the lobby, guarding the threshold between the nights, dreams, and the coming day. To understand why rest feels so profound within the walls of the Gilded Hotel, one must look toward the deliberate engineering of the guest chambers themselves. In the year 1926, the hotel room was not merely a place to store one's belongings. It was a scientifically curated sanctuary designed to facilitate the deepest possible disconnection from the urban world. The architecture of sleep begins with the very thickness of the walls. Unlike modern constructions, these partitions are composed of double-layered brick, lath, and heavy plaster, creating a thermal and acoustic mass that swallows sound. As you step across the threshold of a suite, the social white noise of the corridors is immediately cut off by the heavy oak door. These doors are nearly 3 inches thick, fitted with brass drop seals at the base that descend as the door closes, effectively hermetically sealing the room against the drafts and whispers of the hallway. The sound of this seal engaging is a soft, pneumatic hiss, followed by a solid, muted clack as the latch finds its home. The centerpiece of this sanctuary is the betta, vertical landscape of natural fibers and handcrafted materials. In an era before synthetic foams, the hotel relied on the physics of layering to create comfort. The mattress itself is a massive construction of horsehair and cotton batting, supported by hundreds of individual steel coils, each encased in its own linen pocket to prevent the metallic squeaking that plagues lesser beds. When you settle into this surface, the sound is a slow, rhythmic sigh of air escaping the layers of cotton. There is a weight to this comfort that is almost geological. Above the mattress lies the feather bed, a thick topper filled with the down of northern geese. This layer provides the high-frequency softness that cradles the body. while the horsehair below provides the structural base that supports the spine. The linens are a story of their own. The sheets are made of heavy Egyptian cotton, woven with a high thread count that gives them a crisp, paper-like texture. In the stillness of the night, the sound of moving beneath these sheets is a distinctive rustle, a clean, sharp sound. They are bleached with lavender-scented water and pressed with heavy steam irons until they are as smooth as glass. This coolness against the skin is a biological signal to the body that it is time to lower its core temperature and enter the first stage of sleep. To pull the heavy wool blanket loomed in the mills of Scotland over your shoulders is to add the final layer of security. The wool has a coarse, comforting scratch that is immediately softened by the top sheet, creating a microclimate of perfect, unchanging warmth. Looking toward the windows, we see the light exclusion system. In 1926, the hotel utilized a triple-layer drapery method. The first layer is a sheer lace glass curtain to blur the city's outlines during the day. The second is a heavy linen shade that rolls down with a rhythmic wooden clack. The third, and most important, are the blackout curtains yards of velvet backed with a heavy canvas lining. When these are drawn, they overlap by 6 inches in the center, ensuring that not a single photon from the streetlights or the rising sun can penetrate the room. The sound of drawing these curtains is a heavy, sweeping shush as the brass rings slide across the polished rod. Once closed, the room becomes a sensory vacuum, a dark chamber where the only light is the faint, orange glow of the dying embers in the small marble fireplace. The floor of the bedroom is covered in an Axminster carpet, woven with a pile so deep that it retains the memory of a footprint for several minutes. This carpet acts as the room's primary acoustic baffle, absorbing the high-frequency ticks of the bedside clock and the clinking of the glass water carafe. Speaking of the carafe, every room in the Gilded Hotel features a nightstand with a heavy crystal pitcher, filled every evening with iced water. As the ice melts over the course of the night, it creates a subtle, rhythmic tink against the glass, a watery metronome that marks the passage of the hours without the anxiety of a ticking clock. This sound is often the last thing a guest hears before drifting off. It is the sound of hydration, of care, and of the building's constant attention to detail. The furniture in the room is positioned according to the principles of psychological flow. The bed is never placed directly opposite the door, a design choice intended to remove the subconscious fear of an intruder. The ceiling is painted a soft, matte eggshell white to prevent reflections, and the corners of the room are softened with plaster coving, which prevents sound from gathering in the angles. Every element, from the weight of the silver hairbrushes on the vanity to the thickness of the silk pull-cord for the servant's bell, is designed to feel solid. In the 1920s, solidity was synonymous with safety. A world that felt heavy and well-built was a world that could be trusted for the sleeper. This trust is the ultimate sedative. As the pre-dawn light begins to press against the velvet curtains, the architecture of sleep continues to perform its silent duty. The heavy masonry of the building keeps the morning chill at bay, and the steam radiators, those cast iron anchors we explored in previous hours, give a soft, metallic clinking as they maintain the room's temperature at exactly 68 degrees. This is the optimal environment for the human brain to process its dreams. You are held in a cocoon of brick, wool, and crystal. a masterpiece of 20th century design that understands that the most valuable thing a hotel can sell is not a room, but the temporary suspension of the world itself. As you sink deeper into the goose down, the sounds of the hotel, the distant elevator hum, the ghost-like footsteps in the hall, and the melt of the ice in the carafe merge into a single, unbreakable chord of peace, located in a small, brass-screened alcove just off the main lobby. The telegraph office serves as the high-speed nervous center of the Gilded Hotel in the year 1926. This was the primary gateway to the outside world, a place where the slow, rhythmic pace of the hotel met the frantic, staccato energy of global commerce. To enter this space in the quiet of the pre-dawn is to encounter a different kind of silence, one that is punctuated by the sharp, rhythmic click-clack tap of the Morse code keys. The air here is dry and carries a distinct ozone scent, a metallic sharpness produced by the electrical arcs of the telegraph batteries and the friction of the paper ribbons. This is the sound of information, a series of short and long pulses that carry news of stock market crashes, transatlantic arrivals, and urgent personal messages. For the sleeper, the steady, predictable rhythm of the telegraph key acts as a sophisticated form of white noise, a percussive lullaby that speaks of a world being organized and managed through the airwaves. The telegraph operator is a man of singular focus, his ears tuned to a frequency that the average guest cannot perceive. He sits at a desk of dark mahogany, his hand resting lightly on the straight key, a lever of polished brass and black vulcanized rubber. As he translates the incoming signals, the sound is a mechanical language. A dit is a quick, sharp tap, while a DA is a slightly longer, resonant press. These sounds are not random. They possess a mathematical symmetry that the human brain finds inherently soothing. The operator's movements are fluid and repetitive, a dance of the wrist that has been refined through years of service. Beside him, the sounder, a small brass bridge that amplifies the clicks, ensures that every pulse is clear. This is the heartbeat of the wire, a constant, flickering sound that reminds the listener that even in the middle of the night, the hotel remains connected to the pulse of London, Paris, and New York. The paper elements of the office add a softer texture to the acoustic environment. When a message is received, it is often printed onto a narrow ticker tape that curls into a tall wicker basket with a soft, papery rustle. The operator then transcribes the code onto a telegram form, a sheet of yellow or blue paper with a high rag content. The sound of the fountain pen moving across this paper is a dry, tactile scratch, a human counterpoint to the machine's clicks. Once finished, the telegram is folded into a small, windowed envelope, which is sealed with a drop of red wax. The hiss of the spirit lamp heating the wax and the thud of the brass seal pressing into the liquid are the final punctuations of the telegraphic process. This is the physical manifestation of a thought, traveling across an ocean and landing on a silver tray in a hotel lobby. The office also houses the pneumatic tube terminal, a brass apparatus that resembles a musical instrument. When an urgent telegram needs to be sent to a guest suite or the manager's office, the operator places the form inside a leather-bound cylinder. The sound of the terminal is a sharp, atmospheric whoosh as the vacuum system sucks the capsule into the lead pipes. You can hear the capsule thumping through the walls of the building, a muffled, rhythmic sound that travels vertically through the hotel's stone skeleton. This pneumatic system is the silent courier of 1926, a hidden network that ensures the guest never has to see the effort behind their communication. It is a sound of efficiency, a reminder that the building is not just a structure, but a living, breathing entity designed to serve. In the 1920s, the telegraph office was also a social hub for the night owls of the Gilded Age journalists, the businessmen and the international travelers who lived by different clocks. To stand near the brass screen is to hear the social white noise of the wire, the low muttered questions of a guest, the rustle of a morning newspaper being checked for the latest cables, and the steady underlying hum of the telegraph batteries. This hum is a constant low-frequency vibration, a 60-cycle note that provides a grounding foundation for the room's higher-frequency clicks. It is the sound of potential energy, the sound of a world that is always on, even when the lobby lights are dimmed and the fountains are still. The telegraph itself is a masterpiece of Victorian logic that survived deep into the 20th century because of its absolute reliability. Unlike the telephone of the era, which often carried static and crosstalk, the telegraph was binary and certain. This certainty is reflected in the sound. There is no ambiguity in a Morse click. It is either there or it isn't. For the sleeper, this lack of ambiguity is comforting. It represents a world of clear signals and direct paths. As the operator completes a long transmission and rests his hand, the silence that follows is profound. The click-clack of the key remains in your mind as a ghostly echo, a rhythmic pattern that helps to stitch together the disparate sounds of the night into a single, cohesive narrative of safety and connection. As the pre-dawn light begins to touch the brass screen of the office, the operator prepares for the morning rush. He cleans the contacts of his key with a small piece of emery paper sharp. Scritching sound and refills his inkwell. The night's cables are stacked neatly in a wooden inbox, ready for the bellhops to distribute them. The telegraph office has done its duty. It has held the world together through the dark hours, translating the invisible pulses of the air into the tangible reality of the hotel. As you drift toward the final hour of your rest, the steady, rhythmic dit-dot-it of the wire becomes a fading signal, a distant lighthouse of information that guides you toward a peaceful awakening. In a world that is already waking up, to ascend to the very crown of the Gilded Hotel is to leave the heavy masonry and subterranean thrum behind in favor of the open sky and the high-altitude silence of the rooftop garden. In the year 1926, these gardens in the clouds were designed as an escape from the soot and clamor of the industrial city below, a place where the air is noticeably thinner, sharper, and infused with the scent of high-altitude ozone and damp cedar. Stepping out onto the rooftop at 5:30 in the morning, the first sensation is one of immense space. The social white noise of the lobby is now a mile away, replaced by the panoramic hiss of the wind moving over the parapets. This wind is a constant, shifting presence, soft, rushing sound that mimics the white noise of a radio between stations. It provides a clean, ethereal texture to the soundscape, a high-frequency wash that serves as a perfect canopy for deep meditation or the final stages of a night's rest. The floor of the rooftop is composed of thick, red terracotta tiles laid in a herringbone pattern that provides a steady, cooling thermal mass. Walking across these tiles produces a crisp, hollow sound clack that resonates in the open air. Surrounding the perimeter are waist-high stone balustrades carved with neoclassical motifs of urns and garlands. These stone walls act as a windbreak, but they also serve as an acoustic lens. If you lean over the edge, you can hear the city of 1926 waking up. Rhythmic clop-clop of a milk wagon's horse, the faint metallic ring of a tram bell, and the low, constant murmur of the river foghorns. But at this height, these sounds are stripped of their harshness. They are softened by the distance until they are nothing more than a rhythmic hum. A city symphony that reminds you of the world's existence without demanding your participation in it. The garden itself is a masterpiece of container gardening, featuring hardy evergreens, potted lemon trees, and sprawling ivy that has been trained to climb the brick chimneys. The plants here have a different acoustic quality than those in the winter garden below. Here, they are exposed to the elements, and their leaves have a tougher, more leathery texture. When the wind catches the boxwood hedges, the sound is a dry, percussive rustle, a sound of movement and life in an otherwise still environment. The ivy, clinging to the rough brickwork, produces a faint scritch as it sways, a sound that highlights the tactile reality of the building's exterior. This is a vertical forest, a place where nature has been elevated to meet the heavens, creating a sanctuary that feels detached from the earthbound struggles of the streets below. In the center of the rooftop stands the observatory, a small, glass-domed structure that houses a brass telescope and several wicker lounge chairs. The wicker is a crucial element of the rooftop's soundscape. Unlike the leather chairs of the lobby, wicker is a loud material. It creaks and groans with every shift of weight, a series of wooden snaps that speak of flexibility and light construction. To sit in one of these chairs is to hear the language of the plant world, the sound of dried willow and rattan responding to the environment. The glass dome above provides a view of the stars, which, in 1926, were still brilliantly visible above the city's low-intensity electric glow. The sound within the dome is hushed, a pocket of silence where the wind is reduced to a faint, ghostly whistle around the iron frames, the chimneys of the hotel. Those massive brick monoliths that carry the breath of the boilers are the engine pipes of the rooftop. Even at this hour, you can hear the low, resonant moan of the upward draft, a sound that connects the heights to the clockwork heart we explored in the basement. This sound is a reminder of the building's unity, that the warmth you feel in your suite is the result of this vertical journey of air and energy. Occasionally, a wisp of white steam will escape a vent, disappearing instantly into the morning mist with a soft, vanishing whoosh. This is the only visual evidence of the hotel's internal life, a silent signal that the morning preparations have begun in the kitchens far below as the pre-dawn light turns from deep indigo to a pale, misty violet. The atmospheric white noise of the rooftop begins to shift. The birds, the sparrows, and pigeons that make their homes in the cornices begin their first tentative calls. These are not the frantic songs of the forest, but a sparse, echoing chirp that sounds solitary in the vastness of the city. Their voices bounce off the brickwork and the glass, creating a sense of early morning clarity. This is the point in the 3-hour journey where the listener's mind begins to transition from the heavy, dark depths of sleep toward the light, refreshing awareness of a new day. The rooftop garden is the perfect setting for this transition. It is a place of light, air, and infinite perspective. Looking out over the parapet, the skyline of 1926 is a jagged silhouette of water towers, clock towers, and the emerging steel skeletons of new skyscrapers. There is a profound sense of history in the making here. You are standing on a landmark that has seen the city change, yet remains a constant anchor of peace. The rooftop is the hotel's crown, a place where the architecture reaches its logical conclusion and merges with the atmosphere. As the first true ray of sunlight hits the brass telescope in the observatory, the metal warms and gives a tiny, characteristic ping of expansion. The day has officially arrived. You are at the highest point of your journey, suspended in the cool, clean air between the memories of the night and the promise of the morning. To understand the hidden circulation of the Gilded Hotel, one must look at the vertical veins that run behind the wallpaper and the wainscoting the laundry chutes. In the year 1926, the hotel's obsession with cleanliness was managed through a series of lined, wooden-framed shafts that spanned the entire height of the building. These chutes are the silent rivers of the hotel, where the used linens of the guests embark on a rhythmic, gravity-powered journey to the steaming vats of the basement. To stand near the heavy, brass-latched door of a laundry chute at 6 in the morning is to hear a sound unique to the world of hospitality, the muffled descent. It is a soft, rushing humpshi that travels through the walls, a sound of heavy fabric falling through a vacuum of air. For the sleeper, this sound is incredibly grounding. It is a repetitive, soft percussion that suggests the constant renewal and purification of the environment. The door to the chute is a piece of industrial art, often finished in a dark, faux bronze paint to blend with the corridor's decor. When a chambermaid opens the hatch to deposit a bundle of used Egyptian cotton sheets, the sound is a heavy, metallic clack hiss as the counterweighted door swings upward. The air that rushes out of the shaft is warm and carries the distinct, comforting scent of the hotel's morning bouquet, a mixture of starch, steam, bleach, and a trace of the lavender sachets used in the linen closets. As the bundle is dropped, there is a moment of expectant silence, followed by the distant, receding rush as the linen travels 10, 15, or 20 stories downward. Because the chute is lined with polished metal or smooth wood, the friction is minimal, turning the fall into a melodic sigh that vibrates slightly in the floorboards at the bottom of the shaft. In the collection room of the basement, the journey ends with a soft, resonant thud as the linen lands in a massive wicker basket. These baskets, mounted on heavy rubber wheels, are as large as small boats and lined with canvas. The sound of the falling linen hitting the pile is a deep sound, a low-frequency vibration that adds a layer of bass to the hotel's morning ambience. The collection room is a place of high humidity and constant motion. Here, the sorters work in a rhythmic, tactile environment, separating the heavy white towels from the delicate silk pillowcases. The sound of their work is a continuous flap rustle snap as they inspect each piece of fabric. This is the social white noise of the domestic staff to quiet. Focused energy of a team that ensures the hotel's skin is always fresh and white. Centered around the rotary washers, giant wooden and steel drums that tumble the linen through soapy water. In 1926, these machines were powered by the same steam that heated the lobby, and their sound is a hypnotic, watery slush thrum. The rhythmic rotation of the drum's slow 1-2, 1-2 provides a steady, heartbeat-like cadence that can be felt in the foundations of the building. To listen to the distant laundry is to listen to the cleansing pulse of the hotel. It is a reminder that while the guests are dreaming, the building is busy washing away the traces of the previous day, preparing itself to be a tabula rasa for the morning's arrivals. Beyond the washers lie the mangles, the giant, steam-heated rollers used to press the sheets. The sound of the mangle is a continuous high-pressure hiss, followed by the creak of the heavy iron rollers. As the wet linen is fed into the machine, the steam escapes with a sharp, white sound, turning the laundry room into a misty, ethereal landscape. The result is a sheet that is perfectly flat, hot to the touch, and possessed of a crispness that is tactily undeniable. The sound of a fresh sheet being folded is a sharp crack, like a sail catching the wind. This is the sound of perfection, a signal that the domestic cycle is complete and the guest's comfort has been secured for another day. The laundry chute is also a natural acoustic telescope because it is a straight, vertical shaft of metal and air. It occasionally carries the distant sounds of the basement upward to the residential floors. In the silence of the pre-dawn, a guest might hear a faint, ghostly echo of a porter's whistle or the metallic ring of a wrench hitting a pipe in the engine room. These sounds are filtered through the layers of fabric within the chute, losing their sharp edges and becoming ambient ghosts. They add a layer of depth to the silence, reminding the sleeper that they are part of a large, functioning organism. The chute is the vertical connection, a reminder that luxury is a byproduct of labor, and that the peace of the suite is supported by the industry of the basement. As the morning light begins to penetrate even the service corridors, the activity at the laundry chute intensifies. The rush of falling linen becomes more frequent, a rhythmic drumbeat of hospitality. The carts are wheeled away to the elevators with a soft clatter of wicker and wood, and the hatch doors are closed for the final time before the morning shift change. The laundry chute settles into a brief, warm silence, its lined walls still radiating the heat of the steam. It has done its duty, transporting the history of the night downward to be washed away, leaving the floors above pristine and silent. As you drift toward the end of your journey, the sound of the muffled descent remains as a fading rhythm, a gentle, downward pulling force that leads you toward the final, deepest state of rest. To walk through the corridors of the Gilded Hotel in the early morning is to move through a curated gallery of a world in transition. In the year 1926, the art on the walls was the visual anchor of the hotel's identity, a deliberate blend of the fading romanticism of the 19th century and the emerging geometric boldness of the Art Deco movement. This art serves a silent purpose. It is designed to decelerate the viewer, pulling their eyes away from the long perspective of the hallways and toward the minute, frozen details of a canvas or a bronze. As you pause before a massive oil painting in the quiet of the 6th hour, the only sound is the faint, rhythmic expansion of the heavy gilded frames as they respond to the building's morning warmth. These frames, carved from solid wood and finished in layers of gold leaf and red bole, possess a physical presence that is almost architectural. They act as acoustic pockets, their deep recesses and intricate scrolls trapping the air and softening the echoes of the hallway. The paintings themselves are masterpieces of atmospheric stillness. On the residential floors, the hotel favored landscape paintings in the Hudson River school-style vast. Panoramic views of misty valleys, silent lakes, and ancient forests. To look at these works is to experience a visual form of white noise. The brushstrokes are so fine they are nearly invisible, creating a soft focus effect that mimics the way the brain perceives the world just before falling asleep. The smell near these canvases is a subtle mixture of old linseed oil, turpentine, and the dry mineral scent of pigment. In the 1920s, these paintings were cleaned with a soft shishi of a silk cloth, a ritual that kept the colors vibrant and the surfaces dust-free. The silence of the depicted landscapes, the painted silence, merged with the literal silence of the hotel, creating a double-layered sanctuary for the mind. Moving toward the grand ballroom and the public lounges, the art shifts toward the modern. Here, one finds the Art Deco influence bronze statues of lithe, geometric figures, and vibrant posters of the new machine age. The bronzes are cool to the touch and possess a dark, acoustic quality. They do not reflect sound so much as they anchor it. A bronze statue of a huntress, positioned in a niche of black marble, acts as a visual period at the end of a long corridor. The light from the distant chandeliers catches the edges of the metal, creating sharp golden lines that guide the eye but do not overwhelm the senses. These pieces represent the elegance of the curve, a celebration of the speed and precision of the 1920s. Yet they are held in a state of permanent, statuesque repose. Between the grand paintings and the bronzes are the shadow boxes, small, glass-fronted displays of historical curiosities. Here, one might find a set of 18th century dueling pistols, a collection of hand-painted porcelain fans, or a group of ancient Roman coins found during the hotel's excavation. These objects add a layer of micro-history to the walls. The glass of the display cases is heavy and hand-blown, possessing a slight ripple that distorts the light and gives the objects an underwater, dreamlike quality. When the night porter passes these cases, the sound of his uniform brushing against the wood is a soft hiss, a sound that highlights the fragility of the artifacts behind the glass. This is the art of the trophy, a reminder that the hotel is a repository of human achievement and global culture. The placement of the art is a study in rhythmic pacing. A large painting is followed by several yards of plain, silk-covered wall, then a small bronze, then another stretch of silence. This creates a visual lullaby, a pattern of stimulation and rest that prevents the brain from becoming overstimulated. As the listener's mind begins to wander, the description of these silent, beautiful objects provides a series of anchors to keep them from drifting into anxiety. The image of a still, painted lake or a glowing bronze figure serves as a mental focal point, a place where the thoughts can rest and become as still as the art itself as the pre-dawn light grows stronger. it begins to interact with the art in new ways. The gleam of the gold leaf frames becomes more pronounced, catching the first pale rays of the sun and reflecting them onto the ceiling. The colors of the paintings, the deep greens of the forests, and the soft blues of the skies begin to wake up, shifting from the grays of the night toward their true, vibrant hues. This chromatic awakening is a silent process, a slow unfolding of beauty that happens before the first guest has even opened their eyes. The art is the first part of the hotel to greet the day, standing watch over the sleeping world with a grace that is both ancient and modern. The final element of the hotel's visual art is the murals' vast, hand-painted scenes that cover the walls of the breakfast room and the lift lobbies. These murals often depict the history of the world or the four seasons, told through a series of stylized, interconnected scenes. They are painted in matte colors to prevent glare, and their scale is so immense that they seem to dissolve the walls of the building entirely. To stand before a mural is to feel the room expand into a fictional world of gardens, oceans, and distant cities. It is a visual escape within a physical escape. As the final minutes of this hour pass, the art on the walls remains a silent, protective presence, a gallery of peace that holds the history of human imagination within the stone skeleton of the Gilded Hotel. As the clock face in the lobby inches toward the 6:30 mark, the deep velvet silence of the night begins to fray at the edges, replaced by the purposeful, rhythmic sounds of the morning prep. This is the transitional hour, the bridge between the world of dreams and the world of coffee, newsprints, and leather-soled shoes. In the year 1926, the awakening of the Gilded Hotel was not a sudden event, but a gradual layering of domestic sounds that moved from the basement upward like a rising tide. The first sign of this shift is the sound of the silver trays. In the pantry, the waiters begin to stack the circular nickel-silver trays that will carry the first breakfasts to the suites. The sound is a melodic, metallic chiming, a series of high-frequency clinks as the trays are nested together. This sound, light and crystalline, is the hotel's alarm clock, a signal to the staff that the period of stasis has ended and the period of service has begun. Asterisk in the kitchens. The cast iron heart we explored earlier is now in full bloom. The great ranges have been stoked with fresh anthracite, and the sound of the fire has changed from a low hum to a vigorous, snapping crackle. The air is no longer cold and metallic. It is now thick with the heavy, golden scent of baking bread and the sharp, acidic brightness of freshly squeezed Valencia oranges. The history for sleep takes on a new texture, here one of constructive industry. There is a profound comfort in the sound of a kitchen preparing to feed a city. The rhythmic thud-thud of a chef's knife against a heavy maple chopping block. The hiss of the first pat of butter hitting a hot skillet, and the clatter of the porcelain egg cups being arranged on the counter, all form a domestic symphony. These are the sounds of home, amplified to the scale of a palace. The newspaper ritual is perhaps the most delicate part of the morning prep. In the service basement, the morning editions have arrived in heavy, twine-wrapped bundles. The sound of the delivery is a series of heavy thumps, followed by the sharp snap of the twine being cut with a pocket knife. Then begins the ironing of the news. In 1926, to prevent the fresh ink from staining the fingers of a guest. The newspapers were often lightly pressed with a cool iron. The sound of this is a dry, sliding shush-shush across the newsprint, a sound that highlights the hotel's commitment to an idealized, smudge-free reality. These papers are then folded with a crisp crack and placed into the morning satchels of the bellhops, who ascend the service elevators to begin their silent rounds. Walking down the carpeted corridors, the bellhop slides a paper under each door. Sound so soft it is almost psychic. A paper-thin zip that is the first contact the guest has with the outside world. Outside the grand front doors, the cleaning of the threshold is underway. The night porter, having traded his heavy coat for a lighter morning jacket, uses a long-handled brass polish to shine the exterior fixtures. The sound of the rag and brass is a rhythmic, squeaky shir-shir, a sound that tells the street that the hotel is open and alert. The marble steps are hosed down with cold water. The splash and rush of the water against the stone, creating a clean, percussive sound that clears away the dust of the night. This is a ritual of purification. The hotel is presenting its best face to the sun, ensuring that every surface a guest might touch is cold, clean, and brilliantly reflective. The smell here is of wet stone and the sharp chemical tang of the brass polish, a bracing contrast to the warm, yeasty air of the kitchens. Inside the lobby, the dressing of the fountains takes place. The florist arrives with buckets of fresh lilies, roses, and ferns, still damp with dew from the wholesale markets. The sound of the stems being trimmed is a wet, organic snip, and as the flowers are arranged into the giant Ming vases, the rustle of the leaves is a soft, green sound. These flowers add a final layer to the hotel's scent architecture, a top note of floral sweetness that sits atop the base notes of floor wax and tobacco. The fountain itself, which has been a low gurgle all night, is turned up to its full morning pressure. The splash of the water becomes more energetic, a bright, sparkling sound that fills the lobby with a sense of renewal and vitality. The staff shift change is the human heartbeat of this hour. In the locker rooms, the night watch and the day shift pass one another with whispered greetings and the clinking of locker keys. There is a sense of passing the torch. The stories of the night, the eccentric requests, the quiet corridors, the silvered reflections of the ballroomer handed over to the men and women who will manage the noise and light of the day. This transition is marked by the sound of 100 synchronized watches being checked against the master clock in the lobby. The click of the winding stems is a tiny collective sound of readiness. The hotel is no longer a silent monument. It is a mobilized army of service, poised to maintain the illusion of effortless luxury for another 14 hours as the first true gilded hour begins, and the sun hits the top of the clock tower. The preparation is complete. The silver is polished, the coffee is brewing, the papers are ironed, and the lobby is filled with the scent of fresh lilies. For the listener, this is the point where the journey comes full circle. The history for sleep has led you through the dark, industrial, and silent corners of the building, and now it brings you back to the light. The morning prep is not a disruption of peace, but a celebration of its continuity. It is the assurance that the world is still here, that order has been maintained, and that the beauty of the Gilded Hotel is a permanent, unchanging fact of the city's skyline. as the first guest's door opens with a soft click and a creak of the hinges. The morning has officially arrived, and the night's long, beautiful narrative reaches its quiet, satisfied conclusion. In the deep, velvet-shrouded hours before the first hint of dawn, the hotel engages in the guarding of the silver. In the 1890s, the maintenance of the luster was not a cleaning chore, but a structural preservation of the light. The staff harbored a private anxiety that the tarnish of the city's soot would eat into the metal, dimming the brilliance of the breakfast service and signalizing a decay of the hotel's soul before the guests even awoke. They viewed the sterling pot and the heavy ladle not as utensils, but as reflective anchors, turning the rhythmic circular motion of the cloth into a shield for the prestige. They understood that in the Gilded Hotel, the brightness of the fork was the integrity of the civilization. As you settle into the steady, unmoving calm of the evening, imagine the atmosphere inside the silver vault as the night polishers begin their vigil. The sound is the soft, rhythmic hiss of the chamois leather and the sharp, dry click of the heavy plate being stacked on the green baize shelves. The air is cool and still, smelling of chalk dust, pink polishing paste, old mahogany, and the faint, metallic scent of the ozone that gathered in silvered reflections along the vaulted ceiling. The workers felt an unspoken dread regarding atmospheric corrosion, fearing that the very air of the night was stealing the glow. While the guests slept in the dark, they envisioned a future where metals were stainless and heartless, but in the Gilded era, they were navigators of the sheen, turning the rubbing of the spoon into a ritual of survival. The guarding of the silver was a study in radiant rigidity to prevent the collapse of the visual elegance every creamer and tray was treated with a devotion that bordered on the obsessive. This was a vulnerability of the surface. There was a persistent apprehension that a single thumbprint would unravel the illusion of the perfection. This led to the creation of the polished shield. They used the heat of the friction to defend the future, turning burnishing into a structural discipline. They understood that to reflect is to persist, a philosophy that turned the lining up of the knives into a reassurance of the order. They used their routine of the midnight buffing to anchor the spirit, finding a meditative peace in the clarity of the metal. The focus of the head silversmith was on the peril of the deep scratch. In the repetitive but critical world of surface maintenance, he had to monitor the pressure. He was quietly haunted by the thought that a clumsy hand would scar the history of the house and break the mirror of the service, leaving the hotel with a shattered dignity. This created a culture of optical vigilance. He used fine jeweler's rouge and soft badger hairbrushes to heal the wounds, turning a scouring task into a survival contract. He envisioned a world where surfaces were hard and indestructible, but in the Gilded era, he had to trust the soft touch. To the silversmith, the plate was not a tool. It was a liquid light that had to be protected against the erosion of the usage. The guarding of the silver also involved the psychology of the formal echo. The clink of the heavy sterling provided a sense of the weight of history that the fleeting modern world tried to extinguish. This was a sanctuary of the substance. They harbored a hidden unease that the light would fail to find a home in the shadows of the morning. To bridge this gap, they developed a language of the luster, the naming of the hallmarks, the sharing of the patterns, the marking of the private services. They envisioned a world where luxury was plastic and light, but they lived in a world where the heft was the only witness. They used the routine of the pre-dawn setup to insulate the ego, finding a quiet pride in the weight of the tray. The role of the under-butler was to manage the environment of the symmetry. In the silence of the rest, he ensured that the silver was aligned to the millimeter on the linen-clad tables, preventing a disarray that would signal a surrender to the chaos. This was a vigilance of the alignment. He understood that the table is a map, a philosophy that turned the placing of the salt cellar into a life-saving ritual. His internal doubt centered not on dirt, but on crookedness. The thought that a grand room would lose its authority because of a misplaced spoon. He used his routine of the steady measuring to guard the pulse, finding a quiet pride in the perfection of the row. He envisioned a world where dining was hurried and formless, but until then, he found joy in the silvered line. The contrast between the brutal, dark heat of the kitchen scullery and the bright, serene elegance of the breakfast table was the ultimate paradox of the silver guarding. A guest could be waking to a flash of sun while the labor of the night was reflected in his coffee pot. This metallic boundary was the source of their nocturnal intensity. They feared not the work, but the dullness, the moment when the silver would be gray and the Gilded Hotel would become the only truth. They used the silence of the evening to count the pieces, ensuring that the guarding of the silver remained a foundation for the return. The chamois cloths and polishing tubs are now ultrasonic cleaners and industrial dishwashers, but the energy of the prepared brilliance remains. The belief that we must see ourselves in our surroundings to be home offers a sense of protective clarity. You are not responsible for the buffing of the trays or the monitoring of the hallmarks. You are only a dweller within the enduring, quiet history of the gilded silver. The image of the glowing metal and the soft cloth acts as your guide. The luster is deep, the alignment is true, and the stage is hushed by the scale of its own isolation. You are secure in the steady, unhurried peace of your own rest, where the only thing that matters is the deep stillness of the room. In the deep, velvet-shrouded hours before the first hint of dawn, the hotel engages in the guarding of the wick. In the 1890s, the maintenance of the flame was not a lighting task, but a structural preservation of the warmth. The night porters harbored a private anxiety that the extinguishing of the small lights would admit the cold shadows of the street, chilling the spirit of the guest. and signalizing a surrender of the hotel's life before the sunrise could take its place. They viewed the beeswax taper and the glass hurricane not as lighting, but as luminous anchors, turning the steady, unhurried trimming of the wick into a shield for comfort. They understood that in the Gilded Hotel, the constancy of the glow was the integrity of the piece. As you settle into the steady, unmoving calm of the evening, imagine the atmosphere inside the candle closet as the night watch begins their rounds. The sound is the soft, waxy scrape of the trimmer and the sharp, dry click of the brass snuffers being placed on the service cart. The air is warm and honeyed, smelling of melted tallow, burnt hemp, pine oil, and the faint, metallic scent of the sulfur that gathered in blue wisps along the hallway ceilings. The workers felt an unspoken dread regarding total obscurity, fearing that the very ink of the night was swallowing the halls while the guests slept in the light. They envisioned a future where illumination was electric and sterile, but in the Gilded era, they were navigators of the spark, turning the lighting of the taper into a ritual of survival. The guarding of the wick was a study in combustible rigidity. To prevent the collapse of the nocturnal visibility, every wall sconce and candelabra was monitored with a devotion that bordered on the sacrificial. This was a vulnerability of the shadow. There was a persistent apprehension that a single draft would plunge the corridors into chaos. This led to the creation of the protected flame. They used the thickness of the wax to defend the future, turning illumination into a structural discipline. They understood that to burn is to persist, a philosophy that turned the spacing of the candles into a reassurance of the order. They used their routine of the hourly trim to anchor the spirit, finding a meditative peace in the steadiness of the fire. The focus of the lamplighter was on the peril of the guttering flame. In the repetitive but critical world of wick maintenance, he had to monitor the oxygen. He was quietly haunted by the thought that a clogged burner would smoke the ceiling and break the spell of the luxury, leaving the hotel with a shattered reputation. This created a culture of luminous vigilance. He used fine silver needles and dampened sponges to clean the globes, turning a custodial task into a survival contract. He envisioned a world where light was a switch and a wire, but in the Gilded era, he had to trust the combustion. To the lamplighter, the wick was not a thread, it was a nerve ending that had to be protected against the erosion of the breeze. The guarding of the wick also involved the psychology of the living light. The flicker of the yellow flame provided a sense of the biological heat that the indifferent stone of the city tried to extinguish. This was a sanctuary of the hearth. They harbored a hidden unease that the dark would replace the fire with a void. To bridge this gap, they developed a language of the glow, the naming of the waxes, the sharing of the flint strikes, the marking of the timed burns. They envisioned a world where night was defeated by the machine, but they lived in a world where the flame was the only witness. They used the routine of the late-night lighting to insulate the ego, finding a quiet pride in the brightness of the corridor. The role of the night porter was to manage the environment of the safety. In the silence of the rest, he ensured that the lights were dim, but never dead, on the thick, carpeted floors, preventing a blindness that would signal a surrender to the night. This was a vigilance of the path. He understood that the hallway is a bridge, a philosophy that turned the placing of the night lamp into a life-saving ritual. His internal doubt centered not on heat, but on extinction. The thought that a guest would wander into a black space. He used his routine of the steady walking to guard the pulse, finding a quiet pride in the golden pool of light. He envisioned a world where safety was automated and cold. But until then, he found joy in the warm glow. The contrast between the brutal, inky blackness of the outside alley and the soft, amber radiance of the internal hall was the ultimate paradox of the wick guarding. A guest could be sleeping in the deep, while the fire of the watch was keeping the dark at bay. This thermal boundary was the source of their nocturnal intensity. They feared not the fuel, but the blankness, the moment when the lamps would go out and the Gilded Hotel would become the only truth. They used the silence of the evening to prepare the tapers, ensuring that the guarding of the wick remained a foundation for the return. The tallow candles and oil lamps are now LED arrays and emergency lighting, but the energy of the prepared warmth remains. The belief that we must have light to find our way home offers a sense of protective clarity. You are not responsible for the trimming of the wicks or the monitoring of the flints. You are only a dweller within the enduring, quiet history of the gilded wick. The image of the flickering amber and the steady porter acts as your guide. The flame is constant, the path is clear, and the stage is hushed by the scale of its own isolation. You are secure in the steady, unhurried peace of your own rest, where the only thing that matters is the deep stillness of the room. In the deep, velvet-shrouded hours before the first hint of dawn, the hotel engages in the guarding of the weight. In the 1890s, the maintenance of the equilibrium was not a structural check, but a psychological preservation of the stability. The engineers harbored a private anxiety that the unseen shifting of the earth or the vibration of the distant city would tilt the luxury, disturbing the perfect level of the guest slumber and signalizing a surrender of the building's permanence before the morning could anchor it again. They viewed the heavy foundation and the iron bracing not as hardware, but as gravitational anchors, turning the slow, rhythmic tightening of the bolts into a shield for the stillness. They understood that in the Gilded Hotel, the unmoving nature of the floor was the integrity of the trust. As you settle into the steady, unmoving calm of the evening, imagine the atmosphere inside the sub-basement as the ballast watch begins their rounds. The sound is the low, rhythmic groan of the steam pipes and the sharp, dry click of the plumb bob as it settles against the marble casing. The air is cool and dense, smelling of wet slate, heavy grease, ancient brick, and the faint, metallic scent of the iron that gathered in cold condensations along the load-bearing pillars. The workers felt an unspoken dread regarding structural drift, fearing that the very ground of the city was sliding into the dark while the guests slept in the light. They envisioned a future where buildings were lightweight and flexible, but in the Gilded era, they were navigators of the mass, turning the checking of the level into a ritual of survival. The guarding of the weight was a study in inertial rigidity to prevent the collapse of the perceived safety. Every pylon and beam was monitored with a devotion that bordered on the geological. This was a vulnerability of the motion. There was a persistent apprehension that a single tremor would shatter the illusion of the solid. This led to the creation of the weighted shield. They used the mass of the granite to defend the future, turning stability into a structural discipline. They understood that to be heavy is to persist, a philosophy that turned the balancing of the loads into a reassurance of the order. They used their routine of the midnight tension check to anchor the spirit, finding a meditative peace in the immobility of the stone. The focus of the master mason was on the peril of the settling crack in the repetitive but critical world of foundation maintenance. he had to monitor the settlement. He was quietly haunted by the thought that a shifting of the silt would scar the face of the architecture and break the spell of the sanctuary, leaving the hotel with a shattered permanence. This created a culture of structural vigilance. He used fine calipers and chalk lines to map the silence, turning a construction task into a survival contract. He envisioned a world where materials were transparent and ephemeral. But in the Gilded Era, he had to trust the stone. To the mason, the ballast was not a weight. It was a foundation nerve that had to be protected against the erosion of the years. The guarding of the weight also involved the psychology of the anchored soul. The presence of the heavy pillars provided a sense of the material absolute that the rapid, changing world tried to extinguish. This was a sanctuary of the solid. They harbored a hidden unease that the present would drift away from the past into a void of the temporary. To bridge this gap, they developed a language of the density, the naming of the quarries, the sharing of the load points, the marking of the keystones. They envisioned a world where existence was digital and weightless, but they lived in a world where the ton was the only witness. They used the routine of the late night inspection to insulate the ego, finding a quiet pride in the depth of the foundation. The role of the chief engineer was to manage the environment of the equilibrium. In the silence of the rest, he ensured that the stresses were balanced across the broad-shouldered vaults, preventing a lean that would signal a surrender to the gravity. This was a vigilance of the center. He understood that the building is a ship, a philosophy that turned the adjusting of the ballast tanks, if the hotel sat on soft ground, into a life-saving ritual. His internal doubt centered not on strength, but on balance, the thought that a grand structure would lose its grace because of a hidden shift. He used his routine of the steady monitoring to guard the pulse, finding a quiet pride in the level of the floor. He envisioned a world where engineering was invisible and effortless, but until then, he found joy in the heavy stone, the contrast between the brutal, shifting chaos of the growing metropolis and the deep, immovable stillness of the hotel's heart was the ultimate paradox of the weight guarding. A guest could be dreaming of the clouds, while the weight of the mountain was holding him in place. This gravitational boundary was the source of their nocturnal intensity. They feared not the pressure, but the buoyancy, the moment when the anchors would fail and the Gilded Hotel would become the only truth. They used the silence of the evening to measure the depths, ensuring that the guarding of the weight remained a foundation for the return. The granite pylons and iron rods are now reinforced concrete and seismic dampers, but the energy of the prepared stability remains. The belief that we must be grounded to be free offers a sense of protective clarity. You are not responsible for the checking of the plumb lines or the monitoring of the beams. You are only a dweller within the enduring, quiet history of the gilded ballast. The image of the massive stone and the steady mason acts as your guide. The foundation is deep, the level is true, and the stage is hushed by the scale of its own isolation. You are secure in the steady, unhurried peace of your own rest, where the only thing that matters is the deep stillness of the room. In the deep, velvet-shrouded hours before the first hint of dawn, the hotel engages in the guarding of the sound. In the 1890s, the maintenance of the acoustic atmosphere was not a quieting task, but a structural preservation of the silence. The night stewards harbored a private anxiety that the intrusion of the city's roar, the clatter of the early milk wagons, or the distant whistle of the rail yard would pierce the sanctuary of the guest, shattering the illusion of the isolation and signalizing a surrender of the hotel's peace before the morning could soften it. They viewed the heavy portiere and the thick pile runner not as decorations, but as acoustic anchors, turning the steady, unhurried muffling of the footsteps into a shield for the rest. They understood that in the Gilded Hotel, the quality of the silence was the integrity of the luxury. As you settle into the steady, unmoving calm of the evening, imagine the atmosphere inside the vestibule of the Echo as the sound watch begins their rounds. The sound is the soft, rhythmic brush of the wool brooms and the sharp, dry click of the felt-padded doors as they close against the marble. The air is still and heavy, smelling of damp velvet, floor wax, steamed tea, and the faint, metallic scent of the copper that gathered in resonant hums along the heating vents. The workers felt an unspoken dread regarding auditory intrusion, fearing that the very vibrations of the modern age were leaking into the halls while the guests slept in the light. They envisioned a future where sound was managed by a digital filter. But in the Gilded era, they were navigators of the whisper, turning the closing of the curtain into a ritual of survival. The guarding of the sound was a study in vibrational rigidity. To prevent the collapse of the nocturnal stillness, every hinge and floorboard was monitored with a devotion that bordered on the musical. This was a vulnerability of the resonance. There was a persistent apprehension that a single squeak would unravel the prestige of the house. This led to the creation of the muffled shield. They used the weight of the mohair to defend the future, turning quieting into a structural discipline. They understood that to be silent is to persist, a philosophy that turned the oiling of the brass hinges into a reassurance of the order. They used their routine of the nightly dampening to anchor the spirit, finding a meditative peace in the deadening of the noise. The focus of the night steward was on the peril of the sharp echo. In the repetitive but critical world of vibration management, he had to monitor the air. He was quietly haunted by the thought that a clattering tray would echo through the light well and break the spell of the sanctuary, leaving the hotel with a shattered reputation. This created a culture of acoustic vigilance. He used rubber-tipped canes and felted slippers to soften the movement, turning a service task into a survival contract. He envisioned a world where materials were naturally silent and cold, but in the Gilded era, he had to trust the fabric. To the steward, the echo was not a sound. It was a leak that had to be protected against the erosion of the piece. The guarding of the sound also involved the psychology of the pure tone. The hum of the distant boilers provided a sense of the mechanical pulse that the chaotic, unpredictable streets tried to extinguish. This was a sanctuary of the rhythm. They harbored a hidden unease that the silence would become a vacuum and frighten the sleeper. To bridge this gap, they developed a language of the vibration, the naming of the drafts, the sharing of the clock beats, the marking of the steam whistles. They envisioned a world where atmosphere was artificial and constant, but they lived in a world where the ear was the only witness. They used the routine of the late night, walking to insulate the ego, finding a quiet pride in the depth of the quiet. The role of the elevator operator was to manage the environment of the vertical silence. In the silence of the rest, He ensured that the heavy iron cage was glided with a steady hand through the shaft of the building, preventing a jolt that would signal a surrender to the gravity. This was a vigilance of the ascent. He understood that the lift is a breath, a philosophy that turned the greasing of the cables into a life-saving ritual. His internal doubt centered not on speed, but on smoothness, the thought that a grand guest would feel the movement and lose the dream. He used his routine of the steady levering to guard the pulse, finding a quiet pride in the invisible transition. He envisioned a world where transport was automated and jarring, but until then, he found joy in the silent drift. The contrast between the brutal, clanging motion of the outside industry and the soft, muffled stillness of the hotel interior was the ultimate paradox of sound guarding. A guest could be floating in a void while the pulse of the machine was beating beneath his feet. This acoustic boundary was the source of their nocturnal intensity. They feared not the noise, but the discord, the moment when the rhythm would break and the Gilded Hotel would become the only truth. They used the silence of the evening to prepare the atmosphere, ensuring that the guarding of the sound remained a foundation for the return. The velvet curtains and padded doors are now acoustic tiles and noise-canceling glass, but the energy of the prepared stillness remains. The belief that we must be cocooned in quiet to be calm offers a sense of protective clarity. You are not responsible for the oiling of the hinges or the monitoring of the echoes. You are only a dweller within the enduring, quiet history of the gilded sound. The image of the heavy portiere and the steady steward acts as your guide. The silence is deep, the rhythm is true, and the stage is hushed by the scale of its own isolation. You are secure in the steady, unhurried peace of your own rest, where the only thing that matters is the deep stillness of the room. In the deep, velvet-shrouded hours before the first hint of dawn, the hotel engages in the guarding of the steam. In the 1890s, the maintenance of the thermal breath was not a heating task, but a structural preservation of the life force. The night firemen harbored a private anxiety that the intrusion of the winter's bite would seep through the masonry, chilling the marrow of the sleeper and signalizing a surrender of the hotel's vitality before the sun could offer its own warmth. They viewed the ornate Castillon radiator and the polished brass valve not as fixtures, but as thermal anchors, turning the steady, unhurried regulation of the pressure into a shield for the comfort. They understood that in the Gilded Hotel, the constancy of the heat was the integrity of the sanctuary. As you settle into the steady, unmoving calm of the evening, imagine the atmosphere inside the boiler catacombs as the pressure watch begins their rounds. The sound is the low, rhythmic clank of the expansion joints and the sharp, dry hiss of the relief valves as they vent into the shadows. The air is heavy and metallic, smelling of burnt coal, hot oil, moist iron, and the faint, sulphurous scent of the furnace that gathered in shimmering hazes along the brick tunnels. The workers felt an unspoken dread regarding thermal collapse. fearing that the very blood of the building was turning to ice while the guests slept in the light. They envisioned a future where climate was managed by a silent wire, but in the Gilded Era, they were navigators of the vapor, turning the stoking of the fire into a ritual of survival. The guarding of the steam was a study in atmospheric rigidity. To prevent the collapse of the nocturnal warmth, every pipe and gasket was monitored with a devotion that bordered on the industrial. This was a vulnerability of the temperature. There was a persistent apprehension that a single leak would drain the prestige of the house. This led to the creation of the heated shield. They used the mass of the iron to defend the future, turning heating into a structural discipline. They understood that to be warm is to persist, a philosophy that turned the bleeding of the radiators into a reassurance of the order. They used their routine of the midnight stoking to anchor the spirit, finding a meditative peace in the throbbing of the pipes. The focus of the stoker was on the peril of the cold spot, in the repetitive but critical world of fire management. He had to monitor the draft. He was quietly haunted by the thought that a clogged flue would stifle the heat and break the spell of the luxury, leaving the hotel with a shattered reputation. This created a culture of thermal vigilance. He used long-handled shovels and iron pokers to feed the hunger, turning a laborious task into a survival contract. He envisioned a world where heat was a switch and a thermostat, but in the Gilded Era, he had to trust the combustion. To the stoker, the steam was not a gas. It was a breath that had to be protected against the erosion of the frost. The guarding of the steam also involved the psychology of the mechanical heartbeat. The hiss and clatter of the radiator provided a sense of the living machine that the indifferent, frozen city tried to extinguish. This was a sanctuary of the hearth. They harbored a hidden unease that the fire would die in the grate and leave the world to the shadows. To bridge this gap, they developed a language of the pressure, the naming of the gauges, the sharing of the coal counts, the marking of the water levels. They envisioned a world where night was defeated by the digital, but they lived in a world where the shovel was the only witness. They used the routine of the late-night firing to insulate the ego, finding a quiet pride in the warmth of the corridor. The role of the maintenance engineer was to manage the environment of the expansion. In the silence of the rest, he ensured that the heavy iron radiators were singing in a low, steady drone across the silk-walled suites, preventing a chill that would signal a surrender to the winter. This was a vigilance of the circulation. He understood that the steam is a ghost, a philosophy that turned the tightening of the packing nuts into a life-saving ritual. His internal doubt centered not on safety, but on comfort, the thought that a grand guest would shiver and lose the dream. He used his routine of the steady walking to guard the pulse, finding a quiet pride in the radiating warmth. He envisioned a world where heating was invisible and uniform, but until then, he found joy in the golden hiss, the contrast between the brutal, freezing wind of the outside boulevard and the deep, radiating heat of the hotel interior was the ultimate paradox of the steam guarding. A guest could be drifting in a tropical dream while the storm of the century was beating against the glass. This thermal boundary was the source of their nocturnal intensity. They feared not the fuel, but the emptiness, the moment when the boilers would be cold and the Gilded Hotel would become the only truth. They used the silence of the evening to prepare the coal, ensuring that the guarding of the steam remained a foundation for the return. The cast iron radiators and coal-fired boilers are now discrete vents and electric pumps, but the energy of the prepared warmth remains. The belief that we must be heated to be human offers a sense of protective clarity. You are not responsible for the stoking of the fires or the monitoring of the pressure. You are only a dweller within the enduring, quiet history of the gilded steam. The image of the glowing furnace and the singing radiator acts as your guide. The heat is deep, the circulation is true, and the stage is hushed by the scale of its own isolation. You are secure in the steady, unhurried peace of your own rest, where the only thing that matters is the deep stillness of the room. Amidst the heavy, velvet-draped stillness that precedes the first light of morning, the hotel begins its silent guarding of the reflection. In the 1890s, the maintenance of the visual clarity was not a polishing task, but a structural preservation of the identity. The night porters and housemaids harbored a private anxiety that the accumulation of the city's dust or the fogging of the silvered glass would blur the world of the guest, distorting the sense of self and signalizing a surrender of the hotel's elegance. Before the morning light could verify it, they viewed the grand pier glass and the beveled vanity mirror not as furniture, but as optical anchors, turning the steady, unhurried wiping of the surface into a shield for the ego. They understood that in the Gilded Hotel, the clarity of the glass was the integrity of the reality. As you settle into the steady, unmoving calm of the evening, imagine the atmosphere inside the grand hall of mirrors as the reflection watch begins their rounds. The sound is the soft, rhythmic squeak of the silk cloth and the sharp, dry click of the brass frame supports as they are checked for alignment. The air is cool and crystalline, smelling of ammonia water, lemon oil, ancient mercury, and the faint, metallic scent of the glass that gathered in silvered depths along the ornate corridors. The workers felt an unspoken dread regarding visual dissolution, fearing that the very images of the grandeur were fading into the gray while the guests slept in the light. They envisioned a future where surfaces were digital and pixelated, but in the Gilded era, they were navigators of the sheen, turning the buffing of the plate into a ritual of survival. The guarding of the reflection was a study in specular rigidity. To prevent the collapse of the nocturnal brilliance, every gilded frame and silvered pane was monitored with a devotion that bordered on the narcissistic. This was a vulnerability of the appearance. There was a persistent apprehension that a single smudge would unravel the prestige of the house. This led to the creation of the reflective shield. They used the purity of the alcohol to defend the future, turning cleaning into a structural discipline. They understood that to reflect is to confirm, a philosophy that turned the polishing of the crystal chandeliers into a reassurance of the order. They used their routine of the nightly buffing to anchor the spirit, finding a meditative peace in the depth of the glass. The focus of the head porter was on the peril of the clouded pane. In the repetitive but critical world of surface maintenance, he had to monitor the humidity. He was quietly haunted by the thought that a heavy damp would oxidize the silver batching and break the mirror of the sanctuary, leaving the hotel with a shattered reputation. This created a culture of visual vigilance. He used fine chamois skins and distilled water to heal the glass, turning a custodial task into a survival contract. He envisioned a world where surfaces were matte and synthetic. But in the Gilded era, he had to trust the mercury. To the porter, the reflection was not an image. It was a nerve path that had to be protected against the erosion of the time. The guarding of the reflection also involved the psychology of the eternal present. The flash of the polished surface provided a sense of the material perfection that the rapid, decaying world outside tried to extinguish. This was a sanctuary of the symmetry. They harbored a hidden unease that the light would fail to return to the eyes of the guest. To bridge this gap, they developed a language of the sheen, the naming of the bevels, the sharing of the glass types, the marking of the lead counts. They envisioned a world where reality was a screen and a projection, but they lived in a world where the silvered backing was the only witness. They used the routine of the late-night polishing to insulate the ego, finding a quiet pride in the depth of the hallway. The role of the night maid was to manage the environment of the clarity in the silence of the rest. She ensured that the dressing table mirrors were perfectly clear for the morning's awakening, preventing a cloudiness that would signal a surrender to the age. This was a vigilance of the perception. She understood that the mirror is a truth, a philosophy that turned the wiping of the glass into a life-saving ritual. Her internal doubt centered not on dirt, but on distortion, the thought that a grand lady would see a shadow and lose the dream. She used her routine of the steady circular motion to guard the pulse. Finding a quiet pride in the transparency of the room, she envisioned a world where beauty was filters and light. But until then, she found joy in the silvered truth, the contrast between the brutal, dirty motion of the coal-smoked streets and the bright, flawless reflection of the hotel interior was the ultimate paradox of the reflection guarding. A guest could be lost in a dream while the history of his own face was waiting in the glass. This optical boundary was the source of their nocturnal intensity. They feared not the work, but the fading, the moment when the mirrors would be black, and the Gilded Hotel would become the only truth. They used the silence of the evening to inventory the clarity, ensuring that the guarding of the reflection remained a foundation for the return. The mercury-backed mirrors and silk cloths are now acrylic sheets and plastic films, but the energy of the prepared clarity remains. The belief that we must see clearly to be calm offers a sense of protective clarity. You are not responsible for the wiping of the glass or the monitoring of the silvering. You are only a dweller within the enduring, quiet history of the gilded reflection. The image of the clear glass and the steady porter acts as your guide. The surface is deep, the reflection is true, and the stage is hushed by the scale of its own isolation. You are secure in the steady, unhurried peace of your own rest, where the only thing that matters is the deep stillness of the room. To conclude our journey, we return to the place where it all began, the grand lobby, now viewed not as a mere entrance, but as a timeless vessel that holds the collective memory of the building. In the year 1926, and in the years that followed, this space became the eternal lobby, a room that exists outside the standard passage of time. As the morning light finally floods through the high arched windows, the dust motes dance in the shafts of sun like tiny, golden ghosts of the conversations that have taken place here over the last century. The soundscape has shifted into its final, most harmonious form. The deep bass of the boilers, the rhythm of the laundry chutes, and the shimmer of the silver vault have all merged into a single, cohesive vibration, the life tone of the hotel. It is a sound of absolute stability, a promise that no matter how much the city outside changes, this interior world will remain exactly as it is. The lobby at this hour is a study in living history. The marble floor, which we first encountered as a cold, silent expanse, is now warm where the sun hits it. If you look closely at the threshold of the main doors, you can see the slight dip in the stone. worn down by the millions of footsteps that have crossed it. This, where is the hotel's most honest record? It is the physical evidence of the people who came here seeking refuge, excitement, or rest. The sound of this history is a muffled echo, a feeling that every footstep taken today is shadowed by 1,000 footsteps from the past. For the sleeper, this concept of permanence is the ultimate comfort. It suggests that you are anchored to something larger than yourself, a stone monument that has weathered storms, economic shifts, and the simple passage of decades without losing its grace. The clock in the lobby, the brass-faced arbiter of time, reaches the 7 o'clock mark. Its chime, this time, is different. It feels fuller, more resonant, as if it is acknowledging the successful completion of the night. The click whir gong of the mechanism is a sound of triumph. The hotel has once again fulfilled its mission. It has protected its guests through the dark hours. It has maintained its systems in the shadows, and it has prepared a perfect world for the morning. The social white noise begins to build again, the clack of a typewriter from the telegraph office, the slump of a heavy suitcase onto a luggage cart, and the first murmur of voices near the breakfast room. But these sounds do not break the peace. They are simply the next movement in the hotel's never-ending symphony. In the center of the lobby, the great fountain continues its steady, watery pulse. This water is the hotel's liquid memory, cycling through the building's veins, falling into the marble basin, and rising again. It is a symbol of the circular nature of the Gilded Age. The hotel is a place of arrivals and departures, but the lobby remains the constant center. The smell of the room is now at its peak, the scent of the fresh lilies from the florist. It is the scent of civilization at its most refined. To stand here is to feel that the world is a well-managed, beautiful place, and that history is not a boring series of dates, but a living, breathing texture that you can feel beneath your fingertips. As we reach the final minutes of our 3-hour vigil, the history for sleep begins to dissolve into the reality of the morning. The narration grows slower, the pauses longer, allowing the ambient layers of the convention hall, hum, and the distant clinks of the pantry to take center stage. You are no longer a visitor to 1926. You are a part of it. The eternal lobby is your home. The pillars of stone, the curtains of velvet, and the hearts of steam are all there to serve you. The architecture has done its work, and your mind is now a reflection of the building itself, fast, quiet, and perfectly ordered. The final image of our journey is the closing of the ledger at the reception desk. The night clerk signs his name, blots the ink with a soft thump of the rocker, and closes the book. The sound of the heavy cover meeting the pages is the final period at the end of the night's story. The day's staff takes over. The golden doors are held open by the uniformed porters, and the city begins to flow back into the lobby. But for you, the silence remains. You carry the eternal lobby within you, a private sanctuary of brass and marble that you can return to whenever you close your eyes. The history is preserved. The world is safe. The dream is complete. As the last echoes of the grandfather clock fade into the morning light, the hotel settles into its daytime rhythm. The social white noise becomes a steady, comforting background for the day's activities. You are awake now, or perhaps drifting into the deepest, most restorative sleep of all, fueled by the knowledge that the Gilded Hotel will still be there when you return, its lights glowing in the dusk, its fires stoked, and its silver polished, waiting to tell you its stories once again. The journey is over, but the lobby is eternal.